There is a specific kind of silence you have learned to build around yourself. Not the silence of an empty room, the silence of a decision. You engineer it. You cancel the plan, not because something is wrong with you, but because something in your chest knows, with a precision language was never built to hold, that you cannot spend another evening performing a version of yourself that does not exist. You sit in a room you chose. You turn the phone face down, and for one moment, the moment before the guilt arrives, something in your nervous system exhales. Something ancient. Something that has been waiting all day for this. Then the story begins. The one you have been told since childhood. That the relief you feel when plans cancel is avoidance. That the hours you spend inside your own mind are wasted hours. That your preference for one real conversation over 20 shallow ones is a social deficit. That the way a crowded room feels like radio static, while silence feels like oxygen. That this is anxiety, disorder, something to be corrected. You have been handed a diagnosis for a trait that kept the human species alive for 200,000 years. What the peer-reviewed neuroscience actually shows is not that you are broken. It is that you are running a nervous system so architecturally different from the norm that the clinical tools built to measure the norm were never calibrated to read you accurately. That is not consolation. That is a finding. In 1980, the American Psychiatric Association introduced avoidant personality disorder into the DSM. By 2013, social anxiety disorder ranked among the 3 most diagnosed conditions in the Western world, per the National Institute of Mental Health. The global anxiety treatment market cleared $18 billion in 2022. The preference for inner life has been, in the most literal economic sense, medicalized into a revenue stream. Now consider what Carl Gustav Jung wrote in 1921. In Psychological Types, Jung identified introversion not as shyness, not as fear wearing a quiet mask, but as a primary orientation of psychic energy directed inward rather than outward. A cognitive architecture in which the interior world carries more informational weight, more reality, more significance than the external one. Jung was not describing a broken person. He was describing a categorically different mode of intelligence, one that processes experience through depth rather than frequency, and that requires solitude the way a precision instrument requires calibration conditions, not as preference, but as the precondition under which it functions accurately at all. The century that followed did not integrate that. It pathologized around it. Robert Sapolsky, Stanford's neuroendocrinologist and author of Behave, provides the biological cost of that error. His stress research shows that chronic navigation of socially misaligned environments produces measurable cortisol dysregulation, hippocampal suppression, and degraded prefrontal function over time. The loner forced into chronically extroverted conditions is not being antisocial. They are being slowly damaged by an environment their neurochemistry was not designed to sustain. The diagnosis may have been describing the wound inflicted by the wrong prescription. In 1996, Elaine Aron at Stony Brook University published research in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology that quietly rewrote the evolutionary story of the loner. Aron identified sensory processing sensitivity, a genetically heritable trait, deeper cognitive processing, heightened emotional reactivity, lower threshold for sensory overload. She surveyed over 100 animal species. The trait appeared in approximately 20% of every species examined. 20% across 200 million years of evolutionary divergence. Expensive traits do not survive 200 million years by accident. In hunter-gatherer bands of roughly 150 people, group survival required 2 cognitive architectures simultaneously. The majority move fast, act on partial information, maintain social cohesion. The minority sit still, read the environment at a resolution the moving majority could not access. Detect the pattern inside the noise before it became the threat that killed everyone. The loner was not the band's outsider. The loner was its perimeter intelligence, maintained at metabolic cost because without it, the group was blind to what only stillness reveals. This is not metaphor. This is behavioral ecology. The neurochemical mechanism was mapped by Hans Eysenck in the 1960s and confirmed through modern neuroimaging. Eysenck's arousal theory. Introverts operate at a chronically higher baseline of cortical arousal than extroverts. The extroverted nervous system requires external stimulation to reach optimal function. The introverted nervous system is already there. Crowds and high-frequency social interaction push an already optimized system past its threshold. Solitude is not retreat from life. It is the return to conditions under which the brain performs to specification. The reward architecture deepens this. Research by Depew and Collins, published in Behavioral and Brain Sciences in 1999, established that introverted brains process reward through an acetylcholine dominant circuit, rather than the dopamine dominant circuit driving extroverted behavior. Dopamine, rapid, novelty-seeking, externally triggered. Acetylcholine, activated by focused internal attention, sustained reflection, depth of engagement. Slower, requiring quiet, producing reward through completion of complex internal processes rather than volume of external stimulation. The introverted brain is rewarded by a different category of life entirely, one the modern world treats as a pathology. In 2001, Marcus Reichel at Washington University identified the default mode network, a brain system that activates most powerfully when external task demands are removed. The DMN governs self-referential cognition, future simulation, creative synthesis, and autobiographical integration. It is the brain's most sophisticated processing architecture. It requires one thing to reach full capacity: reduction of external sensory input. The DMN and intense social engagement are neurologically in competition. Solitude is not the absence of mental activity. It is the presence of the mental activity the extroverted environment perpetually interrupts. One layer deeper, the genetic key. Research into the COMT gene's Val158 MET polymorphism, studied by Egan and colleagues at the National Institute of Mental Health and published in PNAS in 2001, identified a variant that slows dopamine clearance in the prefrontal cortex. Carriers process information more slowly, more thoroughly, more completely. They are not overthinking. They are running a genetically encoded analytical protocol that produces higher quality outputs, at the cost of requiring more quiet, more recovery, more solitude to complete its cycles. The loner's need for silence is not personality, it is genome. Now, come back inside your own body. You are in a car park. 12 minutes. A building full of people who walked straight in. From the outside, someone gathering courage. From the neurological reality, your nervous system is running a full environmental scan, processing acoustic data, cross-referencing social context, modeling interpersonal dynamics, calibrating behavioral thresholds. This is not anxiety. Anxiety is a threat response. There is no threat. The person who walked straight in did not skip the scan because they are braver. They skipped it because their system does not run it. Even at the frontier of physics, Roger Penrose's orchestrated objective reduction, contested, not settled science, but serious, asks whether the brain's deepest computational processes require minimal external interference to complete. The established neuroscience of the DMN already answers yes through conventional means. The frontier physics and the peer-reviewed biology are pointing in the same direction. The loner's insistence on silence may be the most sophisticated act of cognitive hygiene the human nervous system can perform. The loner is not a modern anomaly. They are the oldest recurring figure in the archive of human civilization, appearing in every era, every culture, every field that produced work durable enough to outlast the civilization that produced it. Consider the Essenes, the most structurally radical case. This Jewish ascetic community, active from the 2nd century BCE, organized an entire civilization around deliberate withdrawal. At Qumran, on the Dead Sea shore, they removed themselves from Roman imperial culture and the noise of Jerusalem. In that withdrawal, they preserved, in clay vessels, in desert caves, the texts discovered in 1947 as the Dead Sea Scrolls. Documents containing cosmological knowledge the surrounding world was systematically erasing. Their solitude was not antisocial. It was the most consequential act of cultural preservation in Western history. What the majority was destroying, the deliberate loners were saving. Blaise Pascal, 17th century. Following a near-fatal carriage accident in 1654, Pascal withdrew entirely and produced, in deliberate isolation, the foundational work in probability theory, projective geometry, and philosophy that shaped Western thought for centuries. He also wrote the line that has outlasted every epoch since, that all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. The solitude was not the obstacle, it was the method. Carl Jung, 1913 to 1917. Following his rupture with Freud, Jung entered near total withdrawal, no lectures, no publications, and descended deliberately into the interior. What he produced became the Red Book, a document of such psychological density that his family locked it in a bank vault for nearly a century. Published in 2009, it is now a foundational text of depth psychology. Jung's individuation, the process of becoming a whole, differentiated self, requires, as its structural non-negotiable, withdrawal from the collective. You cannot individuate in a crowd. Jung did not theorize that. He lived it for 4 years. Hermann Hesse rendered the same architecture in fiction. Harry Haller in Steppenwolf is not a man who failed at connection. He is a man whose nervous system refuses to accept a reduced version of reality as payment for belonging. His exile is not destruction. It is integrity. In Demian, Emile Sinclair's withdrawal from his peer group is not the wound of the story. It is the doorway, the condition under which he encounters what is actually real about himself. Hesse, who spent formative years in deliberate mountain isolation before writing his most significant work, understood what the clinical establishment spent a century diagnosing. The interior is not empty. It is where the work that matters actually happens. John Cacioppo's research at the University of Chicago delivers the final biological verdict, the one the clinical establishment has been slowest to accept. Cacioppo spent his career distinguishing between chosen solitude and imposed loneliness at the neurological level. They are not the same state. Imposed loneliness activates the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, elevates cortisol, and fires the hypervigilance cascade the body runs when it reads social exclusion as a survival threat. Because for most of human evolutionary history, exile from the group was a death sentence. Chosen solitude does not do this. The nervous system that voluntarily enters stillness is not in distress. It is in its optimal environment. The biology of chosen solitude is not the biology of anxiety. It is the biology of a system functioning exactly as designed. Here is what the full record shows about you. Your reward system is acetylcholine dominant, built for depth, for the kind of reward that arrives not at the surface of experience, but at its resolution. Your cortical arousal is already elevated. You arrive in every room processing more signal than the average nervous system registers. Your default mode network, the brain's most sophisticated architecture, activates most fully in exactly the conditions you were told to treat as symptoms. Your COMT variant encodes a prefrontal protocol producing more complete outputs at the cost of more quiet, more recovery, more solitude. And your sensitivity trait has survived 200 million years because in every configuration of human survival that has ever existed, the group needed someone running your system. You were never anxious. Anxiety is what the nervous system does when it perceives a threat it cannot resolve. What you have been experiencing, the exhaustion after performance, the relief in stillness, the certainty that the interior world is more real than the exterior one the majority accepts as sufficient, is a calibration response. A system so precisely built for signal detection that it has been accurately identifying for your entire life the gap between what the world presents and what the world actually is. That is not a pathology. That is the function the species kept you for. The Essenes, in desert silence, preserved what civilization was erasing. Pascal, alone in a room, completed mathematics the salons of Paris never would have produced. Jung, withdrawn from everything the professional world called essential, produced the document that would redefine the human relationship with the unconscious for the next century. The thing that was diagnosed as your disorder is the thing they could not have done without. You were not broken in the specific and profitable ways the clinical infrastructure needed you to believe you were. You were awake, in precise, calibrated, evolutionarily validated detail. Awake. In a world that spent a century building diagnostic language to call your silence a wound, rather than doing the harder, more honest work of asking what the silence is actually for. Now you know what it is for. The only question that remains is what you are going to build inside it.